If you're working on ride on your fastball, okay, then work on ride on your fastball every day of catch play. And at the end of 4 to 6 weeks, like that's kind of when I try to reevaluate, like you're going to be better at riding your fastball. Like same thing with like an arm action focus. Like if you're trying to get into your scab more and trying to, not lose so much elbow flexion, like, okay, then let's do it and let's just hammer it. And that is your thing today. And that is your process today. And just don't get caught up in, oh, I got to do this and this and this. Like, no, we're going to hammer this out for 4 to 6 weeks. We're going to reevaluate. If you're better at it, perfect. We'll go target the next thing on the tier. If you're not, we're going to keep you in that bucket and you're going to stay there until we get the results we want.
Hey, this is More Than Velocity. I'm Bart Payer here with Ryan Croton and Jordan Oseguera. And today we have Carter Capps with us. Carter has had a 7+ year MLB pitching career and then turned around after that. And he's actually working with pitchers and developing them at various levels. So Carter, if you remember, was pretty famous for his unique delivery. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And Ryan, I know you met Carter in some discussions with the Mets and kind of took it from there. So Ryan, I'm going to let you get started.
Yeah, I'm going to set the stage of what I had thought about having Carter on, but I'm a pretty serious person when I hear the words perfect mechanics. It's really kind of offensive to me in some ways. And I constantly make a habit of looking at pitchers that are very deceptive and they don't move the way that conventional coaches and scouts seem to think is the best way of pitching. And it just makes sense to start talking to those pitchers to see their experience, because in our world, we're selling a tool that's strength focused and our message is strength matters most. And it doesn't matter how you pitch. It doesn't matter, anatomically, we're all different as athletes. We all have different motor control and coordination, but if our strength is down, that's a problem. And it's just great to be able to connect with Carter. And I know, Jordan, maybe I'll turn it over to you because you got some experience. You told an interesting story just previously to this podcast, about how Carter came up on your radar.
Yeah, so I first heard about Carter, obviously, when he was, I want to say it was the Marlins you debuted with, right?
Mariners I debuted.
Mariners.
But yeah.
Yeah, and then you were with the Marlins for a bit.
Yeah.
But I was working for Tom House at the time, and he was surprisingly one of those big advocates in helping get that rule put in, the Carter Capps rule, as they call it, to allow him to pitch the way that he wanted to pitch. I know he was on, I think it was like MLB Tonight or MLB Network, whichever one it was, talking about it. And, I think one of the big things that points out there is, like Ryan pointed out, is the delivery looks. And I think the way Tom described it was that it's funky with a PH. But the bottom line is he had a good kinematic sequence. He had great balance and posture. He hits those checklists of a good delivery, but just because it looks different doesn't mean it's wrong. And I think that's something really important. And to make it even cooler, I think he threw 100 miles an hour, 101 every once in a while. So it's always fun for me to watch just because I like different stuff. So I think it would be cool if you kind of touch on that rule a little bit. Obviously, you probably get that question all the time, but we have some younger listeners, and I hate to throw dates on anybody, but I talk to guys all the time that don't even know who, in a sense, Greg Maddux is. So if you don't mind giving yourself a little background, kind of how that came up, I think that's going to be important, even though you've answered it a million times.
Yeah. So I, like I said, debuted with the Mariners, pretty conventional delivery at the time, a little bit of crossfire, big, like hip turn guy, pretty low into my like leg drive type delivery, but like, foot stay connected to the ground, foot stay connected to the rubber. And then I got traded to the Marlins. And in that time period, the Mariners had wanted to stand me up a little bit. I was like pretty, had a little bit of trunk tilt going. They wanted to stand me up a little bit more and hope like I could throw more strikes. So I started standing up, and then I kind of got out of that like quality hip hinge a little bit. And then I got traded during that time. So, I kind of got caught up with like what the Marlins and the Mariners wanted, because the Marlins had traded for the guy that was, a little bit more over the rubber. So then I ended up tearing my UCL a couple times. I had a few partial tears and it kind of pitched through it. But during that off season, it just like had a ton of like pain in the elbow, and it was just like, it wasn't going away. And like, I could throw with it and it was still coming out, but it was like, it kind of created this big hitch in my arm. So it's like, I got to time up my arm. I know I need to be, somewhere between 0 and like 15, 40 degrees at least to give myself a shot, for that cocking to happen. So it's like everybody gets so locked in on the lower half. Like if you look, the arm action like has this big stab and kind of stalls out. So like the lower half is kind of just a way to buy time for my arm to get up. Like, cause in that initial leg drive, like my arm's not up yet. And then it's like, as I get further down the mound, it's buying me time. And then all of a sudden I come up in here. Cause like I do this really fast, like, and that's my thing, right? Like I can rotate. It's just, I wasn't getting my arm up. And that was kind of like a, self-organization, like compensation for me to give me that extra time that I needed.
Yeah. And I think you said a thing in there, a self-compensation. And that's something we pointed out before. The high-end throwers, your elite athletes, are what I like to call elite compensators. They'll find a way to create that movement to get in the positions they need to be in to compete at the highest levels. And they're not so dialed into, this is the mold I need to fit. They're willing to go, yeah, I'm checking a couple boxes, but I can adjust as needed.
Yeah. For me, like when I teach my guys, they're like 5 or 7, like things that I would like really like to have, but like those harder throwers, those higher end guys, like I only need them to do 1 or 2 really well. Like I'll try and bring the other stuff up, make them a little bit better in those areas that they're lacking in. But like if they can do 1 or 2 things really well, it's like we're gonna leverage that. We have to keep that good because like that's where your velo's coming, whether it's like your lead leg block or you create a ton of hip shoulder separation, or you're just really, really strong. Like we find out whatever it is, and we got to keep that there, or else you're no longer in the big leagues, right? Like if you start going backwards on the thing that you're elite at, then all of a sudden we got a problem. So I got to keep you elite there, and then I just try and bring the other things up to see if we can get you that extra notch or 2.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. And just for guys that are listening in, I know you just recently jumped on as the new pitching coach at Seattle University. So if you want to, jump on and give a little bit of information on kind of what's your process. You said a couple things on there you like to look at, just so people can get a little idea, like, hey, if I go play at Seattle University, what am I going to be working on with Carter on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. So I try and get guys like in these kind of movement buckets, like what are they good at, kind of identify that with video. And then we just start attacking them. So like, it would be like an individual throwing program essentially. And like, they have high days, they have low days, they have moderate days. And like, what your day is, we're going to match it up in the weight room. And it's like you said, like you guys thing is like being really strong. It's like, and that's what I need. Like, I don't want you, going really low intent in the weight room and then going really low intent, at the throwing every day. Like, you just trained yourself to be really average. And like, that's awesome if you want to go be average, but like, I'm trying to get guys to the big leagues. I'm trying to make guys millionaires. So it's like, I want guys that like, they have that top end velo. Like, how do you get that? You got to have top end intent as well. And just like a lot of guys, like, they just don't know how to regulate intent. So like, their high days end up being moderate, their low days end up being moderate, and then it's just all even keel, and it's just they have a hard time getting in that gear. And it's like, bases loaded, games on the line. Like, I need that extra gear. I need that, really, I need that mean guy to come out. Like, I don't really want the nice guys in the locker room, right? Like, I need a different guy out there then.
Yeah, Ryan, real quick, if you don't mind, one of the things I really liked in working with you is we did a lot of those weighted ball programs together with the Angels. And we usually took those guys that occasionally they'd flash some pretty good stuff, but it was, again, that same thing is they got used to running in second gear. So we wanted to take them and teach them how to get into third, fourth gear. And when they really needed to, they could run there in those higher RPMs for a longer period when that winning run's on second base. And one of the things that I think really helped with that, Ryan, was not just adding in what we were doing on the throwing side, but what you were doing with them in the weight room. So I just think that'd be cool because, again, strength is such a huge aspect to why you were able to pitch the way you did. Mm-hmm. To do that, you have to be a freak with the way that you moved. Ryan, if you don't mind kind of jumping on that a little bit, I just think it'd be cool to hear a little bit about your, like Ryan's view of what we did in the weight room, and then hearing Carter's thoughts on how you prepared in the weight room as well.
Yeah, I mean, in training in a week. So it depends on kind of what the athlete's doing from in-season, preseason, off-season to velocity enhancement programming. Let's just quickly touch on velocity enhancement program because we're in the off-season and guys are using weighted balls. They're doing what they can do to bump up their velo. But in the training program for a velocity enhancement program, the athlete needs to focus on Tuesdays and Fridays to be pretty heavy lifts. You need about 72 hours between, and those could be your heavy throwing days as well. There's got to be a lot of recovery between. So, if you're kind of going hell-bent for high intensity all the time. There has to be periods of recovery. But on those training days that you have, your high intensity days, you need to touch on resistances that are at least over 70% of a max effort. And if the athletes have feedback, that's one thing that's so important. It's kind of inherent to our device about feedback, is that athletes need to understand how to appreciate their intent. So we use velocity-based tools. We evaluated barbell speeds. We evaluated trap bar speeds. We evaluated jump performance. We gave these athletes a number so that they were completely focused on providing intent. And that's kind of what Carter was talking about too. Like, it's one thing to execute, but you got to think that you're going to be moving at a high rate of velocity all the time. It doesn't matter what the load is, whether you're lifting at under 50% and it's a highly dynamic lift and you're trying to improve contractile velocity, or it's heavy, you're at 85% of your max and you're getting to a quasi max. You're trying to think, I'm moving this fast. I'm moving this fast. That's like in your mind. You're thinking of a speed gauge. You're thinking of pushing down the pedal on a car. You're giving yourself all your mental models to give that intent. And that's where we see results, with these weighted ball programs. It's just not throwing alone. The throwing can give you that quick fix, that can give you the early season velo, but the ones that sustain you over the course of time and that gets your velocity to the highest level is from what's happening in the weight room. You're getting a lot of elasticity from throwing, but you got to put the horsepower behind it. So, the intensity has to be up, the mental models, the encouragement. I know that was one thing in our training. We were loud. There are times in that push day, like we knew those guys were coming in after they throw their weighted balls. They're kind of spent because a lot of them, the run and gun throws take a lot out of them. We do sprint work before to get them ready. But then when they're coming in the weight room, man, like the coaches, you have to have energy. If you want to get a lot out of your players, you have to have energy. You gotta let them know when they're not giving their best, and you got to encourage them. You got to get really excited when they start hitting PRs in the weight room too. So everything is goal directed. I know that's a long-winded approach to what you're saying, but that's just velocity enhancement training for the off season. I'll stop there.
So, Carter, do you jive with that, or is there something there that you felt like maybe you tweaked it a little different?
No, not like you're saying. You keep the high days high and keep the low days low. I usually do 2 high intent days a week, whether that's like a high intent with overload, underload balls, and then they go and get a 10, 15 pitch touch and feel off the mound. But like whatever it is, the high intent day for me has to be followed, like you said, by a recovery day. Like you don't get to do 2 back-to-back high intent days. That's for relievers, like mid-season. And then even then you try and avoid that. But yeah, no, like you said, you're trying to give them that recovery window, because recovery is huge. And if you guys don't really lock in on your recovery day just as much as you lock in on your high intent day, like you just blow through your recovery day and then all of a sudden you plateau sooner, right? Like we need that adaptation, and a lot of people just kind of blow through their recovery days and think, oh, like it's not as important, right? Like I don't want to, take a day off and not get better. It's like, no, you're getting better, because if you went hard enough on your high intent day, you should need that recovery day.
And I got another question on that. And this is, I'm sorry to jump ahead of your questions, Ryan. We'll get to them. But when you get someone on there, sometimes you have some random questions that pop up on the top of your head. For me as a coach, where I've noticed coaching in both, collegiate baseball and professional baseball, is it's easy to manage those recovery days when an athlete's just kind of going okay. But the hard ones are when they perform really, really well. That's usually when they want to go, I'm going to go train even more. Or when they perform really, really bad, you have those guys in those buckets that go, well, I need to go, get rid of my frustrations and really beat it up. And that's usually when they start hitting those peaks or those valleys, and they do so much extra training that it knocks them down. How would you go about giving some advice to someone on handling the mental emotional stresses? Because the physical prep, while it's taxing, it's difficult, the mental emotional prep is what allows you to stick with that process over the course of 162 games. Or if you're in college, it's really a 12-month season, because you're playing summer ball, you're prepping in the fall and the spring, dealing with classes, 2 a.m. weight room for some reason. If you don't mind going over some of that mental emotional prep.
Yeah, I think towards the end of my career, I was much better at it. But like early on, yeah, I rode the highs and lows just like everybody else with the roller coaster. Like towards the end, you're like, I'm not as good as my worst, or I'm not as bad as my worst day. I'm not as good as my best day, right? Like I'm somewhere in between. So like I tried to view it as like the batters are just giving me feedback on what I'm doing. Like it's me against me. Like and it's just like more like golf instead of anything else. Like I'm not like in direct competition with this batter. Like yeah, I want to get him out and I want to hurt his feelings, but it's like no, I'm competing against myself. Like I am mad when I hang a slider, even if I strike the guy out. I am mad when like I get a call that was a ball and the umpire calls a strike. Like that wasn't what I was trying to do. Like no, like give me that ball back. I want to repeat it. And I think just making it more internal instead of so external, because like when the lights come on, it tends to bring out the best and worst in guys. And I think like the guys that really step up when the lights come on seem to be more like internally focused. Like, no, like it doesn't matter the stage, like, right. Like the size of the stage doesn't matter. Like I still have to execute. And like they get mad, like when they don't execute. Cause like that was in the same thing in the weight room. Like you have a low PR day and it's like, no, that wasn't my best deadlift. Like, I got to be better than that. Like, and it's just the same thing for me. Like I was always a guy that really liked practice. Like I enjoyed practice because like that's when you get the process, right? Like the game is just a reward. That's just like, oh yeah, that's my test at the end of the day. Like, oh yeah, no, I am getting better. But the practice is where all the work's done.
Yeah, and this is something we were actually talking about this morning, and we want to do a little more follow up on this in a later date when we have a little more time on it and stuff. But we were talking about people confuse competition and practice too often, to where there's so many people that go, oh no, I played 142 games, I got way better this year. But when you're in competition, all you're doing is testing what you've done in practice.
Yeah.
And you can't really know what you need to improve on until you fail in competition. And then you go back to the drawing board and work. You got to rough out those edges, or smooth out those rough edges, and really kind of put the shine on what it is you're doing. And that's just like you were saying, oh, you didn't get your best PR on that deadlift. Okay, well, why? How do I adjust my process to make sure next time when I do that in 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever it is, I hit that PR? Or I hung that slider. What do I adjust in my process to make sure next time I get that slider down and away or middle down? So this is all awesome stuff that when you have a guy who's played in the big leagues, and the one thing I like to point out is everyone's going to get told what they're bad at when they're in the minor leagues. You don't get a lot of good feedback when it comes down to it. It's usually, hey, that's not going to work in the big leagues. Well, how do we know? I'm in rookie ball right now. It's always told how awful you are for the most part, not always. And especially with a guy who throws the way you do. That's why I think the process management aspect of this is so important, because you don't deal with the normal everyday, hey, you need to add ride to your fastball, or don't throw across your body. It was, hey, don't throw across your body, plus get your arm in a different position, plus don't jump, plus make sure you stand taller, plus make sure you're quicker, but also at the same time be slow. It's like, what in the world's going on here, So just if you can just give some information on filtering information to make sure you're making that your own as well. And again, Ryan, I'm sorry for hopping in on there again. I said that was my last question, but I want to make sure we're squeezing what we can out of this information here.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think the game speeds up on guys quite a bit. Yeah, same thing in practice. Like if you have like a pre-pitch routine or whatever it is, if you have a pre-practice routine, like go in there, like have 1 to 2 things you're just going to hammer. Like every time I get a guy on the mound, I say, what are we working on today? Like, I don't care what it is. Like, I just want a plan. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, he could say like the most ridiculous thing, and I would like kind of corral it to the point where, okay, maybe that's not really what we want to do, but like, what would you say like would be equivalent to that? And give them a cue. And it's like, now go execute it. Like, just hammer it. Be like a dog on a bone, right? Like, if you're working on ride on your fastball, okay, then work on ride on your fastball every day of catch play. And at the end of 4 to 6 weeks, like that's kind of when I try to reevaluate, like you're going to be better at riding your fastball. Like same thing with like an arm action focus. Like if you're trying to get into your scap more and trying to, not lose so much elbow flexion, like, okay, then let's do it. And let's just hammer it. And that is your thing today. And that is your process today. And just don't get caught up in, oh, I got to do this and this and this. Like, no, we're going to hammer this out 4 to 6 weeks. We're going to reevaluate. If you're better at it, perfect. We'll go target the next thing on the tier. If you're not, we're going to keep you in that bucket and you're going to stay there until we get the results we want. And I think you get a lot of like noise where it's like, if you have too many voices, same thing, you have too many like different cues. It's like, no, like this is your cue, like write it down. Like you're going to tell me your cue, and then I'm going to start using that cue for you. And it's like, that's your cue every day. Your cue every day is to drive your elbow back to get your arm into scat retraction. It's like, okay, perfect. Like then that needs to be, written on your glove, written on your hat, whatever, written in your locker. You need to see that every day and like just hammer it out. Like you're going to get better at it if you do it that way. But if same thing in the weight room, like if you're working on your hip hinge and you're working on a deadlift, and like sometimes you go in there and you just want to go do curls and bench, like, okay, well then what are we doing?
that
Right?
game.
Like, yeah, like that's not it. Like we have to stay focused on the process. So I think that, like, and I'll give the guys sheets where it's like they know their bucket. It tells them why they're in that bucket. So it's like they read it every day. Like that's just your sheet until you get out of it.
This is amazing. I'm just prefacing because Carter, you are a very wise coach. It's kind of unbelievable because you played for so long. But like, when people are listening out there, especially the coaches, there's a couple of things that makes this whole process unique. Is one, Carter has a timeline, and a lot of coaches, they don't put their foot down. He says 4 to 6 weeks. Hey, we're going to reevaluate this. We're going to adjust. We're going to be able to pivot if we need to. But there's a time frame, that he goes back and he evaluates. And that's kind of the consistency with our company too, is, being able to evaluate, being able to pivot, make individualized programmings for guys. But one of the things that really stands out to me is athlete ownership. Literally what Carter's saying is he has a conversation with his athletes and he's not imposing a ton of stuff on them. He's listening to what they say and he's able to help channel them so that they feel they own their process. That to me is when you produce high coaching buy-in. That's what, in my opinion, that's what a major league pitching coach is like, because they're able to communicate with all these all-stars. Now he's got college kids that are amateurs. There's no price tag attached to them. But, hopefully eventually he finds himself at a big league level, but he's able to allow these athletes to feel special and to feel that
there
they're
is
involved
price
in
tags
coaching.
attached to them. It's called scholarship allocation.
Yeah, that's true.
And when they don't produce, you actually have a manager to answer to and go, why is this guy not getting anyone out? What are you doing with this guy? I've been there. I've coached in college. It's more stressful than coaching in the minor leagues.
I love it. I love what I'm hearing. And, I don't see a lot of that in coaching. In my opinion, some of the things that I've dealt with and dealing with other coaches and talking to athletes from other coaches is that the athletes don't feel a part of it. And I know we didn't get to Carter's experience as a player all that much, but like Carter, I think this kind of goes into communicating. Like, how often would coaches come in and say, I want to change this with you. I want to change that with you. And like, I think part of this experience that you've had as a player that I want you to talk about has shaped you to be the kind of coach you are today. So, I mean, I'm just curious because I worked with injured athletes, man, and I'd ask them, okay, tell me all the movements that you were asked to do within the year. What were the changes to mechanics? And some guys would give me a sheet full of things like they were a ping pong ball. And I was trying to see, okay, well, you changed tension here. You change length here, all these different things. So man, just go into that. I'm excited to hear about this.
Yeah. I mean, nothing against my coaches that I had coming up, but like they didn't talk to me, right? Like they didn't. Like I heard from them in the off season. They would call and say, "Hey, Merry Christmas. How's it going? Great. Can't wait to see you in February or February 14th, whatever it is. Always around Valentine's Day." But like that was my off season contact for basically every team I played for. And I just felt like that was unacceptable. And so like, eventually I was like sending in videos and stuff, and like they would get back to me like when they could, but like I'd be sending in videos every day and I didn't care, and it was just like, I'm going to get the most out of this experience. And that's kind of what I tell my guys. Like, I'm like your sounding board. Like, you're going to have questions. You're going to see stuff on Pitching Ninja or whatever. You're going to see stuff in a major league game. Like, don't just like change your grip. Like, ask me, like, yeah, we do need more sleep on your slider. Like, yeah, you should try that trend and slider. Right. But like there's just no communication there. I felt like, and I didn't want that to happen. I felt like when I was going good, nobody even like acknowledged I was there. It was like, just keep throwing 100, like just keep throwing 100, flip in your breakers when you can. Like it's not your second best pitch for sure, but like, just work on that a little bit. But no, I just felt like it was kind of like unguided, like a kind of a ship without a sail. And I just felt like I didn't want to be that as a coach. And then when the mechanic stuff came about, like I was just like on my own basically for a large portion of it. The Padres did a really good job of like, trying to get me right, but it was just like I mean, to be granted, like not a lot of people did that. But it was just like, hey, you're gonna have to figure it out. And I didn't know why I threw hard. Like now I do. But like I just didn't know why I threw hard, so I didn't know what I needed to do. Because like when I get in the game, like I just want to hurt somebody, right? Like I'm just like attack mode, and it's like I want to throw hard. But I didn't understand force production, so like I didn't know how I threw hard, so I couldn't get back there, and it's like I couldn't make the changes that they needed. So it was just it was really frustrating, to be honest, for a year or two, and that's kind of what made me want to go into coaching. Like I never wanted anybody else to experience that.
That's awesome. That's I figured all these experiences, we've all had different coaching experiences as athletes. And now with the world of heavy amounts of data, in terms of producing a game plan for your pitchers, I mean, how do you go about that? Because as a pitcher at the major league level, there's so much information that you're getting on hitters, and some of them it's not even you. Like what you're getting from the analytics staff is like, what this athlete does against a typical righty or a lefty. You got guys who are side armors that some of this stuff doesn't make sense. So like, I'm curious how you prepare guys for games, what info you give them, how you get them right for competition.
And real quick on that, if you don't mind touching on it, how you did that when you were in pro ball, because you just came leaving kind of a travel coordinator's role. And then how is that going to change at all now that you're in college and have a little different information?
Yeah. So the, portals are different, obviously. Seattle U is putting in a TrackMan unit, so that's going to be huge. They do have Rapsodo, have Edutronic camera that we can use. So like the player development stuff is largely similar to what I had when I was with the Mets. It's just like, it's all on me, right? There's no like really analytics. It's just like whatever I interpret. So like I have my own biases, obviously, and I try and avoid those as best I can. But I think what you do is you say, okay, you try and go in whatever level you're at, major league, AAA, AA, high school, right? You find league average. Like, what is a league average fastball? Okay, what does a league average fastball look like? Velo, ride, spin efficiency, spin tilt. Okay, perfect. Like, we know we don't want to be average, right? That's the one the hitter sees the most. We want to be above average or below average. So below average would be more sink, above average be more ride. Okay, like you're in, a 115, like let's push you closer to that 110 spin tilt and hopefully pick up an inch or two of ride. So like it's the same stuff with the movement. We're just going to hammer it. So I'll give them a clean fuego ball or something I've started doing lately. There's a ball that I just draw like a line right on the 4-seam grip. So it's just a vertical line. It's like, I want to see the line. Like, show me the line every time you play catch. Like, this is your catch play ball. Like, once we get into, spinning your stuff, like once you come back in, like I'll give you a different ball. But like, I want to see the line on the ball. Like, that's telling me you're back spinning it. Like, if the line is wonky, like you're cutting it, maybe it's trunk leak, maybe it's your hand position, whatever.
Great
like,
usage of wonky, by the way.
Yeah. Like, so I want to see like, and that's your like, focus there. So like you would have a pitch metric focus and you would have a movement focus. And then same thing, 4 to 6 week evaluation period. But then as far as like in game usage, it's like, okay, he against league average sliders, he, crushes. I don't have a league average slider. I have a better than league average slider. Okay, perfect. That doesn't really apply to me. I'm still going to use it. I'm just not going to leave it up out over the plate, right? Like if the guy hammers 2-seamers, perfect. I don't throw a 2-seamer. Like, okay, so I'm going to ride it at the top of the zone. Like I'm going to get in on him. Like it's just understanding your skill set. Cause like when you get the heat maps, it's average, it's not even average by slot. Usually it's just average. So like Tyler Rogers gets the same heat map as, Melanson. Like, it, doesn't make any sense, right? They have completely different skill sets, completely different pitches, but it's like, and that's another thing that drives me nuts is like, what is a slider? Like, is this a slider? Is this a slider? This slider? Like, they're all sliders. Like, you can't just say, he crushes sliders. Like, does he crush my slider? Like, I need to know that. And I think largely just knowing what your skill set is, and then like understanding, like, you got to be honest with yourself. Like, I have a largely average slider. So like, I have to execute with my slider. I cannot get away with mistakes. So if I do go, 0-0 slider, like I still need to get it there. I can't just throw it, get me over. Like when I go 0-2 to the slider, like I got to get it to that spot. I got to get it to his back foot. I cannot leave it up over out of the plate. So it's like, just manage your misses from there.
I think you said something really important. And I'll piggyback that off. I had the opportunity to work with Joe Blanton when he came back as a reliever. After he kind of just quit, didn't like baseball for a bit, came back as a reliever. One of the things he changed in his scouting reports was, I believe he had to go to an outside source, but he said, I only want to know what hitters do against people like me.
Yeah.
So he said, if they're, plus or minus X amount of velo, plus or minus X amount, we didn't have TrackMan at that, like fully at that time, but he said, if they're plus or minus graded similar to my, cutter, change, whatever pitch he's throwing, I only want to know what those hitters have done against guys like me.
Yep.
And then he was able to dial in his ability because he's like, I don't have 3 innings to figure this out. I'm not a starter anymore. I come in, and at the time he was with, I believe it was the Nationals. It was the year he was able to dip between the Nationals and the Royals on that playoff bonus. And he got a World Series ring because he ended up getting the World Series ring with the Royals on that. Both those teams were in the postseason. What a great year, double dip on a playoff bonus. But he comes back and he's like, I come in with a runner on 3rd and 1 out. I don't have 3 hitters to figure out. I need to know what I need to do right now to get this guy. And I think you said that perfectly, that it's like, yeah, this guy's great against league average, but I'm below average of the league on this, or I'm an above average. So you have to be able to dial that plan in specifically for your skill set.
Yeah. With the TrackMan CSVs now, it's so easy to do. Like you can just go in there and tab it, and you can, I did it with my guys at the complex, and it's like, you have Phil Maton's slider, lacking 1 mile an hour, right? Like, so it's like they have a comp, and it's like, go look up video, see what that guy does. Like, don't look up video of Scherzer's slider that you don't have, right? Go look at, Maton's slider, or, go look at Sales, fastball, whatever. Like just understanding, like, I mean, it'll be, I can filter it down to like, the 1/4 inch, like, and it's like, you got 8 inches horizontal, you got, 75 miles an hour on the slider. Like, you have this guy's slider essentially, like, but you're not using it like him. Like, if you go look at, other guys' heat maps, like a lot of the best guys, like, their heat map matches their pitch usage map, and it's looks like you can't even tell the difference between the heat map and the pitch usage map, right? Like, it's like they just overlap. The cold spots on the like WOBAs and ex-WOBA charts, like that's where they're throwing it the most, right? Like they're leveraging their skill set, just like they leverage, whatever they do well with the mechanics.
Yeah, and I got a buddy who's just recently become a D1 pitching coach out in Southern California, and he's learning a lot of this analytics stuff because he's been a coach at a junior college. He played for me in college. I know I've heard Bart and Ryan both refer to where I coached at as the Ivy League of the West Coast. So the analytics is a little higher status there over at Vanguard University. But he's a Division I college pitching coach now, and he's been going through some of those same things. Like, how do I take all this information that I've never really had access to and make sense of it? And we're running through that same process that you just talked about of going, understand what average is, number one, for your group, because you guys you can't compare that to everyone else in your conference yet. You don't have that data. But once you know the average of your group, then you can start understanding, okay, where are my guys at? How do I need to develop this? How do I develop that? And then just go on to, StatCast data. And you can start grabbing some general inferences. Now, it's a little different if you got to know where to find it in a TrackMan CSV to find similar stuff to StatCast. But if you know where to get it, now you can do exactly what you just talked about. And you go, okay, here is, player A's slider. He compares really well to actually Kershaw's breaking ball. So then you can actually put those apples to apples comparisons of dialing in a plan for what you should be looking for. And it helps you understand, like, if you think a guy should be building right on his fastball, but it turns out he's closer to an elite 2-seam, maybe you go with that elite 2-seam to start.
Oh, yeah.
Just some jumping off points. I don't know if you guys have anything to throw in on that.
Well, I just like the whole, you've kind of separated it where in the game, we're using analytics to win with what we have. So you're going out there and you're going to use what you have, and you got to be honest about what you have. And then you're using the analytics or your game plan for training and practice to increase that rise or do whatever you're doing. But you got to take what you've got into the game and win. And I think that's just a great way of looking at it.
Oh yeah. Like I tell guys, like, don't get beat on your third best pitch. Like, game's on the line. Like, if you lose the game, like, you're going to have to go in and look at everybody in the eye, like, on the way back to the bus, and it's like, everybody's always making eye contact with the guy that blew the game. It's like, God,
I've made a lot of eye contact in those. I blew a lot of games.
It's like, it's so much easier to make that, like, walk of shame when you got beat. Like, when I get beat on my fastball, like, if I get beat on a changeup, it's like, I can't look guys in the eye. It's like, no, I cost us the game because I went with not my number one weapon, right? Like if I get beat with a fastball, like that's my go-to. That's been my go-to my whole career. Like I'm going to get beat on fastballs. I don't get beat on changeups. You know what I mean? So
that's awesome. Ryan, Jordan, what else? This is our chance. What are you going to ask?
Go for it, Ryan. I've dominated this question asking so far.
I guess, for me, if you could go back to your development, to the beginnings, let's just say it could be as early as when you first started baseball. It doesn't matter to me, but what things would you change in your process, that you think might have given you even more of a better opportunity at the highest level?
Yeah, I think now it's a little different because the internet is so, it's kind of an equal playing field, right? Like education is the great equalizer. I think I would go back, and as soon as I could afford it, I would pay for quality like coaching. I think that gets, overlooked somewhat. Like, yes, you got to have the skill set. Yes, you got to have the genetics, but like quality coaching, and like you don't have to pay for it for like a year, but like if you could get like a few quality coaching points for like, a week or two or a month, and it's just like I said, just hammer that out, and then you go back to that coach in 2 years, like, hey, what do I need to work on now? Like just that quality aspect, because like unfortunately, like, and it's gotten better, but like there's just a lot of coaches out there that don't quite know, or they know enough to be dangerous. Where it's like, if you can hammer these movement patterns early, if you can, catch some stuff, like if a guy comes in, I'll always give the example, like you look at all the Dominican guys we get, like they all have these amazing arm actions. Like it's like survival of the fittest, right? Like the Dominicans that aren't able to hit really, like that are shortstops that have these really good arm actions, like we put them on the bump. So it's like we get this like crop of like elite arm actions, like just based off of like survivorship bias. But like if you almost had that, coaching early on, like could we coach that arm action? Could we, have more guys play shortstop or just multiple positions or whatever, and not be so sport specific from the onset?
Nice.
Hey, I think this has been great. I've enjoyed it. I think if I was looking at schools to play baseball, I'd definitely be looking. I mean, it's impressive.
Vanguard University.
At Vanguard, obviously, but Seattle University as well. I mean, just the wisdom. I mean, coming out of your mouth, it's exciting. I think if you're hearing this and want to hear more, I'm going to put some links in the show notes. I'll probably find a video too of your delivery, just so people know what the heck we're talking about as well. And if you've got any questions about this or others, just please ask us either over on our site, armcare.com, or subscribe here. And, once again, thank you for joining us, and really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you guys for having me. Like, this has been awesome. Like I said, I can talk baseball all day. So I appreciate you guys getting me out of the humdrum of just sitting at these TrackMan CSV sheets. So
I have been there as well, so I get you.